Welcome to the morning devotion with Pastor Francis Musonda from Life Path Worship Center in Lusaka, Zambia. Now, this whole week we've been looking at the life of Jacob, as we did even the whole of last week, and we've made tremendous progress. Yesterday we found out that Jacob is still trying to exhibit very strong characteristics of being a horizontal man. A horizontal man in the sense that when you look at verses 20 to 21 of chapter 28, Jacob is still trying to manipulate God, telling God, I will only believe that you're my God if you do this for me, if you provide me with food, if you provide me with clothing, if you see my safe passage to Uncle Laban's house and also bring me back to my promised land. That's when I'll know that you are my God. So to do this is really, in a sense, not having the right or exhibiting the right faith. And it is important at this stage to recognize that there's so much emphasis on physical blessings from Jacob. If you give me food, if you give me clothing, if you see my way in and my way out, it's all about physical blessings. How many times do we miss the blessing of God, child of God, because we are so focused on just the physical things? There are many, many riches in heaven that we should be really looking at and piling up and waiting for God to celebrate us one day. But we see that Jacob is a very horizontal man and is still firmly fixed on the physical blessings and on manipulating God. Today, we find out how Jacob meets with his father-in-law called Laban. Genesis chapters 29 to 31. Jacob finally met his match. If Jacob could supplant, he found a man who could do it twice better. If Jacob could manipulate people, he found a person who could do it twice better. If Jacob could deceive, he found a man who could do it 10 times better, his uncle Laban. Now, Laban and Jacob's mother, Rebekah, share the same father. And that man was a very passive man, as we came to learn in the last few weeks that we've been studying this particular topic. He was a very passive man. And that made Laban and Rebekah both turn out to be very, very skillful manipulators, taking advantage of the vacuum created by their dad as they were growing up. Perhaps the point we are reaching now is this. If you're the kind of person who lives by the sword, who lives by the sword, you will die by the sword. If you sow deceit, you will reap deceit. If you sow deception, you will reap deception. If you sow manipulation, you will reap manipulation, because God cannot be mocked. What you sow is what you reap. So he had sown these seeds, Jacob, and now when he meets his uncle, he begins to reap the same seeds that he had sown. His harvest is not too pleasant. He doesn't like it. Chapters 29 to 31 tell us how Jacob worked for 7 years for Rachel, and then on his wedding night, late in the midnight hour, Laban, the master manipulator, sends his older daughter Leah into the tent of the groom instead of Rachel. Okay, he wakes up in the morning, Jacob, after he's met his wife in the night, and he was very happy to have her there in his bed, to share his bed. But when he examines her in the morning, it is not Rachel, his beloved bride. It is the older sister Leah. And he goes fuming to his father-in-law. How can you do this to me? I've worked for 7 years, and I've been working for this girl. I love Rachel, but you give me Leah. May that not be your portion, child of God. May you not labor 7 fruitless years and reap the wrong harvest. May God give you the bride that you have deserved all along. And if that bride is a contract, may God give you the right contract, and may nobody switch that contract for you late in the midnight hour. If that bride represents a job in your life, beloved, may God protect your job, and may nobody ever switch that job for you late in the midnight hour. If that bride represents a marriage, may God not switch your bride late in the midnight hour. I protect you now, and I seal you with the blessing of the Lord. You will enter into your inheritance, and your blessing will not be switched. We continue with Jacob. We find out that Jacob has some serious trouble brewing. Why do I say this? Because Laban turns around and uses exactly the same strategy against him. He says, where you have come here, young man, it is not our practice to marry off the younger one before the older one is married. So, if you want Rachel, as you say you love her so much, work for me another 7 years. Surely, beloved, a blessing that should have taken you 7 years now must take you 14 years. May that not be your portion. You will not labor in vain, and you will not double the pain for something that God has already given you. I came to declare to you that nothing will be lost in your hands and nothing will escape your hands. I came to rebuke the spirit of stagnation, that what is supposed to take you 7 years for a promotion should not take you 14 years. I came to refuse that stagnation on your part, and I came to bless you in Jesus' mighty name. Now, child of God, we see that the man was totally and deeply in love with Rachel. He's got no choice. He begins to work another 7-year shift, this time for Rachel. And then he puts in another 7 years for his animals. And we know that he was carrying the blessing of God. And these 21 years that he spends with his uncle are spent pretty much in slavery. Now, here is a guy who is moving with the blessing of the Lord upon his life. But this guy finds himself in 21 years of slavery with his uncle. And this guy finds himself working for things and putting in a double shift for things that should have been straightforward. Please do not sow manipulation. Do not sow deception. You will reap what you sow. The Bible tells us, because of the blessing that was upon the life of this young man called Jacob, whatever tricks that Laban tried to come up with to switch the flocks of Jacob grew in number. They grew larger and larger, and in the end we see the blessing of God resting strongly on Jacob's life, and he became very prosperous. Now we have encountered 3 very distinct paradoxes, and the first paradox I see here is that Jacob has a father who's passive, and his father is Isaac, who initially had gone against the oracle, had gone against the prophecy of God upon Jacob's life, but ends up fulfilling it and ends up blessing Jacob in his own words. Paradox number 2, Jacob's own efforts to become the master of his brother, to let the order save him. That effort, which is engineered by him and Rebekah, although it was meant to come to pass by God in God's own time, it leads him to a situation where he has to leave his own family. He never gets to see the mother that he loved so much, and he goes into a 21-year-old period of slavery. The blessings of the Lord maketh rich, and they add no sorrow. Wait upon the Lord for your blessing. Do not jump and cut corners. Paradox number 3. Jacob, the young brother, supplants the older brother. Okay? Laban uses the same technique to do and exact the same thing that Jacob did to his brother. In other words, you will reap what you sow. So what am I saying? What does Laban say to Jacob in Genesis chapter 29 verse 26? It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the first. So work another 14 years if you want Rachel as your bride. You see that whatever you have planted as a seed will one day manifest. Be careful, child of God, what seeds you plant in other people's lives. Be careful that you're not planting the wrong seeds. Be careful that if your harvest matters that much to you, it is a harvest you can predict. So plant the right seed with the right DNA in that seed so your harvest can be bountiful. Now, we will be looking tomorrow at a subheading, the wrestling match, the ultimate wrestling match between Jacob and God. Child of God, I hope you've been blessed by this message. We're back tomorrow, same time in the morning. and we're here to complete the study on Jacob, after which I'll be calling on a few brethren, both here at home in Zambia and also out there in the United Kingdom, to bless us with a word as we continue on this topic or series entitled Reclaiming Switched Destinies. Pastor Francis Musonda from Life Path Worship Center in Ibex Hill, Lusaka, Zambia. Shalom, shalom.